Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes for everyone to come into the room before we start in earnest. As you can see, we've got Vincent and Leila here, waiting patiently. So we've got people coming into the room, and while we're waiting, I will just like to say that questions can be posted into the chat box, and we will try to get through as many questions as we can at the end after Leila and Vincent do their bit. I will also post links of relevant things that they mention in their conversations, and also links to our upcoming events. I will post them in. We've got a very exciting program over the next couple of months, and they're all on our website. As soon as we get them confirmed, we put them on our website and you can register for them. So, so I'll post links for that in the chat box as well. So any questions that you have, please pop them in the chat box, and I will relay as many as we can at the end. So, like I said, we've got Vincent and Leila here. Leila Sansour is a Palestinian British filmmaker. She spends half her time here in the UK and half her time in Bethlehem. She's been a filmmaker for over 24 years, and she spent 10 years documenting the wall being built around Bethlehem by the Israelis. You may know some of her feature documentaries, Jeremy Hardy versus the Israeli Army, and also Open Bethlehem. And we've got Vincent here as well. Many of you are very familiar with Vincent. He is, of course, the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Balfour Project. He's a retired member of the British Diplomatic Service, and he was Consul General to Jerusalem between 2010 and 2014. He's also been ambassador to Libya and High Commissioner to Malta, and we're very lucky to have him as the chair now of the Balfour Project. So I'm going to hand over to the two of you now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dee.
The Q&A.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Leila. It's a real pleasure. We're not together in the same studio, but we're together in spirit, and it's very nice to have you with us on the Balfour Project webinar. May I ask you to say hi and to perhaps introduce the clip from your film Open Bethlehem that we will show in a minute or so. Over to you, Leila.
Well, I welcome everyone to our webinar again. A few words about myself and this film that you will see an excerpt from. I come from Bethlehem. I grew up there. Maybe like many people who live and grow up in a small town. When I was a teenager, I felt this town was too small, too kind of conservative, provincial, and I wanted to leave it. I explored the world. I lived in cosmopolitan cities. I settled in London. But around the year 2000, 2002, I started feeling like many people do, I think, the need to go back to reconnect with home. I think when you become an adult and you are yourself ready to build something, to create, that's when home starts calling you. And sadly for me, when Bethlehem started calling me again, Palestine started calling me again, that's when Israel was about to start building the wall. So when you are really in that, while I was in that spirit of I want to build my country was being actually destroyed in front of my eyes. As a filmmaker, one of the things that I felt I could do in the very least is to document the building of the wall, to create a document, a historic document of a development that was likely to change the face of Bethlehem radically to the worse. So I thought I might spend 1 or 2 years doing it. But as it happens, I actually spent 10 years both documenting the building of the wall in Bethlehem and then also mounting a campaign alongside many other people who were trying to fight against the building of the wall. So the excerpt that you'll see today is part of a film that I made at the end of these 10 years. The film itself is 90 minutes long, but the excerpt is a very short one, maybe 8 minutes, and it's specifically about the area of Rachel's tomb, which is an area that is situated at the entrance to Bethlehem. And I think the excerpt itself is self-explanatory, so I won't talk more. I will just leave you to watch it. So I'm handing over to Diana, who will play the excerpt.
The whole situation started with the second Intifada. We were really affected so much, by the shooting of the Israelis, because behind us, we have this military camp, and they occupied, of course, this building here. And now in front of us, they start building the wall. If somebody comes close to the wall, they start shooting. If somebody crosses even, to the unfinished area, they start shooting.
That's a bullet hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bullet, actually. There is another one here. You can see it. See the two holes.
Was there any compensation or?
Compensation from whom? Who's going to compensate you? Nobody.
And you can sense. It's really what's happening is they're carving around it.
Yes, we're going to be pretty much surrounded from 3 directions by the wall.
Right.
Rachel's tomb was one of Bethlehem's affluent neighborhoods, situated in the vicinity of an ancient shrine, erected on the burial site of the biblical matriarch Rachel, who died on her way to Bethlehem as she gave birth to Benjamin. Throughout the ages, the site fascinated pilgrims and painters, and had been venerated by Muslims, Christians, and Jews. But it was the 3rd holiest site in Judaism, so Israel got busy changing the face of the tomb the moment it laid hands on it in 1967. By 2001, the shrine was encased inside a fortified construction, and locals were banned from entering. Rachel's legacy had become the property of Jewish pilgrims alone, and only Israeli buses had access. Now the familiar white dome was just about visible from behind mounds of concrete. And with the wall, Israel's plan was to cut the tomb out of Bethlehem altogether. On a map, it would look like this. This is the neighborhood, this is the tomb. The wall was supposed to skirt around the edges of the residential part of the area, then form a corridor that would dig even deeper into the city to carve out the site and annex it to Israel. People like Basim and Claire were unfortunate to live nearby, but they had to be grateful. They would be able to remain in Bethlehem. Others had it even worse. An old-time shopkeeper called Khalil found himself on the wrong side of the wall. His shop stood here inside the southernmost tip of the corridor. When the construction is complete, Khalil will lose his business because neither he nor anyone else in Bethlehem would be able to set foot in this spot. أدخل عندك؟ مرحبا مرحبا.
هذه أرضي، شايف شو؟ أجوا أخذوها وروني ورا السوق.
هذا بس جديد أخذوه كله صح؟
شايفها؟ راحوا نزلوا جرفات والتركات والبواقر وجرفوا ولا سألوا.
أوكي.
والمحامي
بسرعة نبنى.
نعم خلال شهر كان مبحثوث. شهر كان انتهى خلص.
هلا أنت قديش لك بهاي الدكان؟
40 سنة. المحامي رفع عليهم دعوة. عبونا يخلوني يعني محصول جزاء على المحلين. المحكمة ردت قالت شغلة أمنية في تجي. وكلمة أمنية أمن باخذوا كل الدنيا باخذوها كلمة أمن. هذا مدخل مدينة بيت لحم. هذا أحسن منطقة في العالم. اتدمرت.
هذه أحسن منطقة بالعالم صار؟
نعم. قبل السياحة والعمال كلهم يجوا هنا يدرسوا السيارات. أشهد لله. أشهد لله بكيت أنا ملك بيت لحم. صبحنا شحالين. والله يا ليلى صار فيها ما صارش في حدا بالعالم. حك ملايين الشكلات شو سعيد الحين. هم ما بيصدقوا يسكر المحل. يوم الأحد بصلي بيتي. الله يا ليلى غضل أول تموت. مش حدا ولا شو. قال شو يعني واحد ينسى تعب العمر ويروح. شو ينسى كان انسى شو هذا ينسى؟ ما لك 40 سنة تتعب فيه. راح بلدنا.
For all the tragedy it was causing, Israel's only response was that the wall was needed for the security of its own citizens. But why not build it then, on Israel's own borders? And how safe was it to provoke such rage among one's neighbors? It didn't take long before the road to Jerusalem was sealed permanently, severing the last link between the two twin cities. No one could believe it, and emotions were running high. From now on, the people of Bethlehem would need military permits to pay a visit to their family on the other side, see their doctor, or go to work. Those who continued protesting risked arrest. 40% of Palestinian men have been to jail for political reasons. If you're arrested, you are blacklisted. If you are blacklisted, you might never get a permit again. So in time, you become resigned to the fact that you are now a prisoner.
من مارثي إرميا النبي كيف جلست وحدها المدينة الكثيرة الشعب صارت كرملا العظيمة في الأمم السيدة في البلدان صارت تحت الجزية.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you for making the film. Thank you for introducing it to us today. And I think in the chat, we will be sharing with our colleagues who are watching today how to access the film, which is well worth doing. Can I ask you to say some words about life in Bethlehem today? The wall, which is now more complete, around Kremisan as well. The effect of the occupation, COVID, the lockdown, and the empty hotels of Bethlehem. So over to you again, Leila.
Well, I mean, I think it should come as no surprise that the current situation, being under military occupation for decades now, a kind of stifling of the city's economy that was augmented even by the building of the wall. With COVID today, the situation is really, really dire for people in Bethlehem. And it is very sad for me to say that, because in a strange, ironic way, during the making of my film, I thought a lot about the history of Bethlehem and researched a lot the history of Bethlehem, and sort of realized just how much potential the city has. People maybe underestimate the amount of energy and also potential of Bethlehem, and being such an important city historically and religiously for so many people in the world. Whenever we had the chance to be open to trade, to define our own history, to define our own future, Bethlehem thrived in a way that is very difficult to describe. At the end of 19th century and early 20th century, it's actually quite mind-blowing the amount of wealth, experience, worldliness that existed in Bethlehem. And it was so sad for me to be reading about this history, looking at some of the pictures and footage from that time, and seeing just how it is possible to create a man-made disaster that stifles such a wonderful place that could have been a light onto all the region around it. I mean, Bethlehem is such a successful place. It is a city that has a diverse community in terms of religiously speaking. It was always a very comfortably shared, happily shared space by Muslims and Christian Palestinians. It's a place that welcomed the world. We had so many international institutions because of the importance of Bethlehem to the world. We had so many visitors. The city was able to receive them, welcome them, rub shoulders with everybody, with so many different nations. And so the potential is huge. And yet here we are, we find ourselves today genuinely, I mean, reduced to a ghetto. In the past, like during even at the early stage of the establishment of the PA, you'd find that people in Bethlehem, as opposed to many other cities in the West Bank, did not work that much in Israel. We had enough work in our city. Today, with the building of the wall, with the stifling of the tourism industry, and the city, I mean, about 70% of Bethlehem's economy depends on tourism. So you can imagine what it means. Every time there is unrest, every time there is closures, we really suffer. The whole economy comes to a standstill. So today, unfortunately, with COVID, the situation is not different. Again, for a city that very much depends on the freedom of movement, COVID means, and Bethlehem got COVID very early on. It was almost like straight after China locked down, we locked down in Bethlehem because we had some visitors from Greece, and the first COVID case was detected, and the whole city went into lockdown, partly also because apart from everything else, we don't have currently the capacity, the kind of standards of healthcare that would be needed to look after a population under duress from a viral infection. We have a tiny hospital at the moment that deals with cases. We have like 4 ventilators, which, although I know that ventilators not proved to be very successful, but we have 4. I think Poland donated 6 more recently or something like that. We have maybe just 10 ICU units in the whole of the town. So it is a real challenge. After the building of the wall, many Bethlehemites started needing to work in Israel. And that means we need permits for them. And it's very difficult to obtain. Today, with the situation with COVID, the permits have become even more difficult. So a city that does not have a way of sustaining itself internally cannot even easily seek economic support, even on the very basic level of, even when people are willing to do manual labor in Israel. Unfortunately, even that has become a difficult thing. I don't know what to say. I mean, I think we keep thinking about how to move forward. Obviously, everybody's looking forward to the possibility of a vaccine to end this crisis. Again, also now Christmas is on the doors.
It's upon us.
Yes, normally this is a big time for Bethlehem. This is also both a big celebratory time for Bethlehem, as well as a big injection of to the Bethlehem economy, because this is when people come and visit. This year, we don't even know whether the actual the traditional ceremony of the patriarch procession coming into Bethlehem, how it's going to take place. In fact, the patriarch, the Latin patriarch of Jerusalem, has just been diagnosed with COVID himself. And it's still that a lot of people at the patriarchate have been diagnosed with COVID. So we really don't know even whether that will happen. And there are slight rumors that Bethlehem might go into actually into a curfew mode. So beyond the lockdown. Currently, we have a 10-day lockdown because of, like everywhere else, I mean, there was a loosening of the initial lockdown, then COVID spread again, then another lockdown. And there is a slight chance that after the 25th and 26th of December, we might go into a complete curfew in town. So.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Well, it's I can remember the visits on Christmas Eve by the Latin Patriarch in my time, and the Anglican Archbishop of Jerusalem, and that gate that you showed opens once a year for the convoy of those clergy and their flock to get into Bethlehem from Jerusalem. Then it shuts again for 364 days. And I remember that sharp turn to the left before the wall, before the gate. I might say a quick word about my own experience of the wall. In my time, there were protests by Palestinians and Israelis who understand the need for equal rights against the extension of the wall through Kramisan, neighboring Bethlehem. And one of the ways to protest peacefully was to hold a mass on Friday afternoon. I'd finished work by then, so I used to go now and again to the mass. And hundreds of people came to demonstrate by their silence and by their devotion, by their prayer, their opposition to the building of the wall. And very sadly, it's been completed around Kramisan, and it separates land from people, and it's a very depressing aspect of the occupation. I might say a few words, Leila, about the numbers of Christians in the Holy Land now, and at the time of the British Mandate. It's maybe worth saying that the Balfour Project is focused on Britain's role in the Holy Land, in what's now Israel, Palestine, and trying to raise awareness of the role that Britain played. Very sadly, some of the activities, the policy actions of the Israeli government are copies of what was done under the Mandate, house demolitions and so on. The scale now is much bigger, but the example, I'm afraid, was set by the British Mandate period. So back to the numbers. When Britain left Palestine in 1948, I think the numbers are about 21% of the population were Christian in the whole of Israel, Palestine. Now it's less than 2%, and in Gaza, less than 0.5%. And I wonder whether you could say something to us about where the diaspora has gone, where the people are, the people that your parents, your dad grew up with in Bethlehem. Where have they gone to? And perhaps something about the importance of the remaining Christian community in Bethlehem in terms of hospitals, education, and so on?
Yes. Well, as you said, I mean, that development and the fact that we are losing the Christian community so fast, to the point that many churches have been warning that they may cease to be sustainable as a community within my generation, you know, that's quite an alarming development for all of us. I mean, the exodus of Christians from Palestine started actually early on, really, with so the drafting into the army of during the Ottoman times. Like my great-grandfather eloped, as many did at the time, from Palestine, taking ships from Marseille to the Americas. Usually, that's what that's where they were aiming for, and therefore many people from Bethlehem have ended up in different countries, but large populations exist today in South America, in Chile. It was quite actually a difficult and dangerous journey to make. So they were quite, I would say, dashing to even attempt it. But I think once the community was established there, every new unrest that happened, Palestinians from Bethlehem and Christians from Bethlehem found it's so easy to join their relatives who were already established abroad. So many left to South America. We have some people in Australia, in North America, some in Europe, and many countries around the world. I mean, most recently, Sweden has been a place people go to. Canada. There is a very large Palestinian diaspora, which is larger than, the diaspora is now larger than the population in Palestine. Mm. And of course, what it does is it kind of takes away from a very important feature of Palestinian identity, where I think really I don't like being boastful, as I once said to you, Vincent, but I do think Palestine was a very successful, has been a very successful entity in terms of how its population relates to each other. I think we had all the ingredients to build a very strong democratic state that could be an example to a region that really struggles to kind of stand on its feet. But we have been undermined, and the example of Christians would have been a wonderful example of a country in the Middle East that can live with its diverse communities and thrive because of it. So in a way, it could have been an celebratory model of diversity in the Middle East. Apart from the fact that also the Christians obviously bring an element of a bridge to the Western world. There is a sense of a greater openness, exchange of ideas. There is a great interest in Bethlehem. So these are dynamic centers that create a dynamic, forward-looking people. And I think that instinct existed in places like Bethlehem. It's probably worth mentioning that Muslims do see Jesus as a prophet. So in fact, the Nativity Church is shared in terms of its religious aspects, even from that point of view, by both communities. And I think the fact that the city's economy depends on tourism means that Muslims work very closely alongside Christians to welcome pilgrims and, to run the economy. So in a way, it kind of also taught both communities, not just from an idealistic point of view, but from a very practical point of view, how to live and work together. Yeah. So we had to live and work together. And that's actually positive. So, I mean, and to add to all this, I mean, we are a city whose heritage belongs to the world. Bethlehem has had, obviously, an important Christian identity throughout its history. And I think that, what a shame if we cannot sustain ourselves in these cities where when pilgrims come, they're not coming to a Disneyland, but they're coming to a living church that has practiced and worshipped in this place from the times of Christ. So that we are a living document to kind of a tradition that carried on from biblical times. I think this is by itself, like from our heritage as humans, is of such importance, I think, that I find it mind-blowing to imagine that we will forfeit that.
I agree. No, I agree. It's important that the Church of the Nativity should not become a museum. Just speaking of the pilgrims very briefly from me, I hope, as you do, that the vaccine works and that in the second half of next year, the pilgrims can return as soon as possible to their destination, to their holy sites in Jerusalem and in Bethlehem. It might be worth saying a couple of words about, before we come on to the university issue, about the role of the Christians. I've got some figures here. Taking just the Catholics, they're not the biggest Christian community. The Greek Orthodox is the biggest. The Catholics
they used to be the biggest Catholics, but
yeah, that's right. But the Patriarchate runs 118 schools, 118 schools, which complement the work of the Palestinian Authority with the state schools. Several hospitals, and the Sovereign Order of Malta, the St. John of Jerusalem in Malta, helps with the nativity, the maternity hospital in Bethlehem. There are a couple of universities founded and run by Christians, the Lutheran University and the University of Bethlehem, that I'll come on to in a second. And the numbers of Christians to make those things work is dwindling, because the economic opportunities and, to be honest, the political horizon is bleak, and therefore people have to decide where their kids will go and how well they will, how well they will live. And everybody wants their kids to lead a better life than they did. And that's why activists like you, and why charities like the Balfour Project exist, to try to ensure equal rights, equal opportunity, and the chance for the people who live where they live to carry on doing that and to invest for their own future. But can I come on to the university? Because I know your father, your late father, was integral to the conception and the life of the university. It's run by the Christian Brothers, one of the Christian universities, but the majority of the staff and the majority of the students, of course, are Muslim. Could you say some words about the university and its role, and indeed your father and his role there?
yes. Well, I suppose as it was always thought in ancient times, that every self-respecting city had to have a temple and an institution of higher learning. And I think Bethlehem has one of the most important temples in the world, the Nativity Church. And so my father's very great ambition, and I think many people's as well at the time, was for Bethlehem to have a really great institution of higher learning. I witnessed the very onset of the beginning of when people started building Bethlehem University. And it was really a very challenging undertaking, because building a university under military occupation meant that you're constantly clashing with the military administration, who didn't want Palestinians to collectively organize or be collectively organized on any level. So it was very difficult for the university to have licenses to start, to have bank accounts, to have anything. So really, on some level, the university ran almost like a maverick affair at the very beginning. And so it is so heartening to see it stand on its feet today, although, of course, not without great challenges. But today, the university sort of gives education to more than 3,000 people a year, and I think building towards being able to cater for 4,000 students. It has a very large number of subjects, as well medical, has a medical department, which a nursing department, which is trying to turn into actually currently a center that might be able to provide clinical help to the public. It's trying to focus on applied sciences to kind of work with our times and allow people to learn skills that will keep them in Bethlehem. I mean, that's one of the big ideas, is that the situation being so difficult in Bethlehem, a lot of people, if they do get the chance to study abroad, end up not coming back. So if they, and unfortunately, that is the tragedy with immigration, is that who does immigrate in the end? The people who either have the funds to do it, or they, they have the entrepreneurial, so they start a business abroad, or they're very well educated, so they can find a job abroad. And that's the thing, that's the sad thing, that we have a very great brain drain out of Bethlehem. So the university allows us to create a generation that has had its youth and its education and all its social connections built inside Bethlehem. And often these people end up staying and end up having a lot of loyalty to the city and to the idea of working towards building it. And I think that's very important, that the civil pride, the kind of the sense of investment in the common good, is a very important instinct. And I think institutions of learning, such as Bethlehem University, are critical in building a society where people are invested in their community, invested in their cities, invested in the future of the town as a whole. And so I think, well, I mean, I can only say that I'm so delighted to see that so many people abroad also understand that and support it. And there's a very strong and very active network of Friends of Bethlehem University.
Maybe
you are kind of connected to them one way or another, as well as to many other networks that support twinships.
Yes.
With Bethlehem, which is also very important. So maybe you can say a few words about your experience of working with Bethlehem along these lines, the civil society line.
Yes, indeed. I visited the university, and I'd like to salute now Professor Bart McGettrick, who's with us as a guest today, the chair of the International Board of Regents of Bethlehem University. And there is a charity called Friends of Bethlehem University, and Deanna will be putting some information about the Friends into the chat for anybody who wants to support that good university. In terms of twinning and friendship, one of the hats I wear, which I'm proud to wear, is to be the patron of the Britain-Palestine Friendship and Twinning Network, which is about 30 or 35 groups in the United Kingdom linked to either Palestine as a whole or to a particular locality. So for instance, we have Dundee, Nablus, Hanwell, Sebastia, Glasgow, Bethlehem, a formal twinning, Kennington Link to Bethlehem, an informal friendship group, which is strong and can grow, and about another 30 of that kind. And we have a website, Twinning with Palestine, and anybody who wants to either join an existing group or work with local friends to create one, you need about 10 people, activists, if you like, people who will actually do something to form such a group. But they're important because they show to Palestinian people that they are connected. They're connected to the world. And your description earlier of Bethlehem as a kind of light to the nations is true. It's true. It's still true. It will always be true. And the idea that we can work to generate greater connectivity between the United Kingdom and Palestine is it's entirely benign. It's a win-win. It's a win for the British people, as well as a win for the Palestinian people. And while I have the microphone, if I may, I might just say a little bit about the Balfour Project, and then ask you a tricky question, Leila, which is about hope. Where will hope come from? Where does it come from? But the Balfour Project is trying to do a few things. As I said earlier, it's trying to raise awareness. It's seeking to influence Parliament. And I would recommend to everybody, as you may have heard me say before, that writing to your MP, lobbying your MP, if whispering doesn't work, shouting at your MP is a useful, positive activity in a democracy. I'd also say that what you said about the democratic instincts of the Palestinian people is entirely correct, Leila. The people I've met want to see elections, they want to see pluralism, they want to see Palestine as a beacon of democracy. And it can be that, But coming back to the project, we're working in Parliament as best we can. In October, as some of our listeners will know, we had a big virtual conference on Jerusalem and ended up with a statement on Jerusalem calling upon our government to recognize the state of Palestine on 67 lines. That statement is going to Boris Johnson and Dominic Raab later this week under the signature of several MPs and faith leaders, Christian and Muslim. We're trying to develop links in Europe, in Ireland and in mainland Europe, of parliamentarians who care about equal rights, and to attempt to bring them together to have a discussion about how to be more effective in those national parliaments, including our own, to make common cause, because no one country, not even the United States, is going to resolve this conflict. It needs to be a collective effort, and it needs to be a collective effort of words matched with deeds. So those are some of the things we're doing. The group of European parliamentarians are writing to President-elect Biden to say he is not alone, that his instincts, which I think are sound about addressing this problem, but he will need to be encouraged to prioritize it. But his instincts are sound, I think, and the winding back of the misdeeds of his predecessor will be a challenge, but it's a challenge that I hope he will rise to. And we are also saying that Europe can play its part. European nation states and the European Parliament and the European Union can play their part. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do. And perhaps the last word before I turn to hope is to say next May, we're planning another big conference, another virtual conference on the rule of law. The one thing that the Palestinians have and that they will always have is the rule of law. They have international law on their side. They are an occupied people. They have every right to seek their freedom from occupation, ending the occupation by peaceful means. And the rule of law depends on the political will of our governments to implement that law. The law is known, but to implement it. So the conference in May will be an attempt to focus on that, both generically on the rule of law itself, what it is, and secondly, on its application to this conflict. But that's enough from me for now. Back to you, Leila, and the tricky question of where do we find hope? Where do we find the sumud? Where do we find the ability to keep going in what is a marathon, very clearly, and not a 100-yard sprint? Over to you.
Yes. Well, I think that to start with, I actually find the whole concept of sumud a little bit strange sometimes, because in the end, what other option do Palestinians have? We are there. We have this identity. We have hopes for this country. We are invested in our cities. We are rooted in them. So Palestinians are going to continue trying to do the best by themselves and by their country and dream. You know, we will continue dreaming on. That's not going to stop. And with the dream comes also action. Hopefully, we will get better at it with time, not worse. I think that political maps often feel like they're not going anywhere, but we know that they change. History shows that surprises always happen, and there's all kinds of axes along which things might shift. We don't know. I mean, Europe has all kinds of challenges, problems these days. I think one hopes that at some point, somehow within the European consensus, something will emerge that says it is absolutely a must to stabilize the Middle East. And I don't see how you could, because as you know, Europeans like telling themselves that what goes on in the Middle East doesn't stay in the Middle East. It does spill onto the world around it. And I think that I cannot see a stable Middle East without resolving the Palestinian issue, at least not for now. Even with all the agreements with the Gulf and all that, I still don't see that it is possible to achieve real stability without resolving the Palestinian issue. And so, and the truth is, the issue is resolvable. We have a blueprint for the solution. It's not beyond our reach. It's very difficult, but at the same time, we know how we can move forward, and we should. We have international law on our side. Maybe one day, international law will have stronger legs than it has today, sadly. But we have to constantly try and appeal to it and strengthen it with everything we have as tools in our kit in Europe. I think one can hope, I don't know whether that's possible, that the new generation of Jewish people, young Jewish people, might have different attitudes towards what they want to see Israel as. I know that in America, a lot of young Jews who are joining other movements, like because of climate change and other things, suddenly finding out about Palestine as part of learning about other issues, and because they are aligning their interests and aspirations with other groups. So it could be that it's surprise of shift in the map, the political maps come from places we don't quite know, or comes from all these elements changing in different ways. And we should be very alert to all these changes. And as I said to you one time, I think we should never ever be frivolous to any windows of opportunity that open in front of our eyes. We should really, really be careful to understand what could shift and put our energy to try and seize the opportunity to help that shift come about. And it can only happen if we continue working, even as we wait, even as the map is not clear maybe at the moment, but we continue to work, we continue to building strong operations that are able to speak for Palestinian interests in Britain, in other European countries, in America, that are able to lobby. I mean, that's why I think the Balfour Project is a wonderful project in that way, because we have to maintain a meaningful link with the British political establishment. And that link has to be fed and grown in order for there to be a meaningful discourse at some point, if the opportunity arises. Of course, you know, we have a new American administration. We should be careful looking at what this administration gives, what it might open in front of us, even if it allows us to take small steps, but we should always be taking these steps, if they're concrete, practical steps that change the map a little bit for us in our favor, we should always seize that. And so that's probably where the hope comes from. What do you think about, I wondered, what do you think about the new American administration and what is achievable, you think?
Well, the letter I mentioned is an attempt to focus attention on the conflict. The challenge, I think, is not the goodwill of Biden and Kamala Harris. It's not about their goodwill. It's about their willingness to actually face Israel They will face Israel on the issue of Iran and the nuclear deal. I think they will seek to re-enter the nuclear deal with Iran, and Mr. Netanyahu doesn't want that. What can they do to encourage a stop to settlements, an end to settlements? What can they do to do that? Because settlement expansion is killing the prospect of an independent sovereign state of Palestine in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, which is the hope and the aim of the Balfour Project. So back to Biden, ensuring that he gives this issue priority. I think the appointment of Antony Blinken as Secretary of State is a good one. He's an experienced diplomat. He knows the map, he knows the terrain, but it will come back to political will. And I would like our own government, because the Balfour Project starts at home, to encourage the United States not to act alone. In the past, far too often, the United States has acted alone, and it is not in a position to be a totally honest broker in this conflict. It is not, because of the influence of the Israeli lobby and of the Israeli government in Capitol Hill. So it should not seek to act alone. It should act with Europe. It should act with like-minded nations to show that the current trend towards inequality, which was the last in the last speech by John Kerry, the last good Secretary of State of the United States back in 2016, before the Trump administration came in, separate and unequal was his looking at the trend, his prediction of Israel. And it need not be that way. It need not be that way, but it needs the international community to form up with one voice and more than voice to persuade Israeli electors that their leadership should change tack. May I salute at this point Vera Baboon, who is with us as a guest today, the previous mayor of Bethlehem, and very welcome, Vera. And I greatly respect everything that you have done to keep the candle burning in Bethlehem and for Bethlehem around the world. Can I say a couple of words about practical support for Bethlehem and for Palestine? We've mentioned the Friends of Bethlehem University and Bart. There is also a charity dedicated to keeping Christians where they were born. It's called Friends of the Holy Land. I think we have Brendan Metcalf with us from Friends of the Holy Land and Peter Rand today. They help Christians, the very few Christians in Gaza, with work support. They support the School of Joy in Bethlehem, a school for handicapped children. They are a force for good. There is also Hadil, which is an offshoot from the Church of Scotland, from the St. Andrew's Church in Jerusalem and also up in Edinburgh, selling Palestinian products, but also products specifically from Bethlehem. Embrace the Middle East, another good charity which sells Palestinian products. And in times when there is no tourism, going online to buy Palestinian products is the way to go. There is Medical Aid for Palestinians, the charity of which I'm a trustee currently, run by M.A. Shalan, which does great good in Gaza, the West Bank, and in Lebanon, in the camps. Pal Music with Heba Zafiri Zarifi, who put on a great show about a week ago of Palestinian music, not for the first time. And we've talked about tourism and pilgrimages and travel to Palestine. Those are all valid ways of offering practical support, in addition to the idea of twinning and friendship. And here I'd like just to mention Tony Richardson from Oxford, the Oxford Ramallah twinning, another formal twinning, which is a great achievement. But I'm going to turn to you now, Leila. We've got maybe another 15 minutes or so to go, if we go over the hour, and I think we should. I'd like to produce my passport to Bethlehem. which I was honored to receive from you a couple of years ago. And I'd like you to say some words about Open Bethlehem, not just the film, but about the campaign and about what people can do to support Bethlehem, in your opinion. Back to you.
Yes. Well, after I started working on a film that would document the wall, of course, it's not very easy to just think that this is enough. So I soon started a campaign. Our hope was to, I worked with a group of people, and we coordinated with Bethlehem Governorate at the time and the President's office even, to try and mount an effort, a public diplomacy effort, if you wish, to try and remind people what's happening in Bethlehem. I mean, Bethlehem has a way of living in people's imagination and sort of hearts in a way that's different to Palestine. And so we wanted to remind them by using Bethlehem as a microcosm, as a window into Palestine, what the whole of Palestine is experiencing. But also to explain to people around the world just how much of human heritage we are losing by losing Bethlehem, by having Bethlehem vandalized in this way through settlement building, through the wall. And the idea of the passport emerged as a way of saying to people, Bethlehem is a city whose heritage belongs to everybody in the world, and it should be everybody's, it should be our collective effort to help safeguard the city and everything that stands for. So it was a way of, if you were building a network of supporters, ambassadors for Bethlehem around the world, and you are one very good one, Vincent, I have to say, I'm always quite heartened by your dynamism, really. Not every former consul general to an area does what you do, to, you know, for the sake and the future of this area, you know. In a way, you somehow become a consul for the Palestinians, which I tend to be very heartened by. So we continue. I mean, most of our work today, at some point, obviously, I toured very vastly with the film. We showed the film to more than 300,000 people, face to face. That's not only online. This particular Christmas, we are trying to have a digital campaign to targeting certain American states with using some clever new marketing strategies to try and reach out to communities that maybe need to hear about Bethlehem and haven't heard about it at all. We screened the film even in Congress. I had a screening in Congress, which in itself was a little bit of a project, because not only that we screened the film, I spent 2 weeks, as I said, lobbying in the walls of the Congress, which reminded me of the derivation of the word lobbying, because it comes from literally spending your time in the lobbies of the American Congress, which I did for 2 weeks, meeting different Congress people, congressmen, congresswomen, trying to persuade them to form a commission to come and visit Bethlehem on a fact-finding tour. There was a lot of interest at the time, and hopefully one day we might be able still to put together this commission to come, like a delegation, a fact-finding delegation from Congress. But of course, the situation is changing all the time within American politics. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult to sustain these efforts. And it's also difficult to sustain these efforts because many of us fire on our passion, on our commitment to the cause. We have very limited resources, really. And at the moment, as Open Bethlehem, we try and focus our attention on supporting lobbying efforts or advocacy efforts among churches and also the British government, because this is what we know how to do. And this is the kind of the sphere in which we can operate without needing huge resources. So this is what we're doing now and trying to focus on now.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think the time has come. We're near 4 o'clock, and if everybody is happy, we have a lot of questions I can see in the chat. I haven't seen them, but Deanna is going to share some with us. If we keep going, maybe for another quarter of an hour, if everybody can live with that, then over to you, Dee.
Hi there. Yes, we've had so many questions. I will be passing on attendees. I would like to let you know that I'll be passing on the chat comments to both Leila and Vincent, so they'll read all of your comments and your questions. I'm going to try to get through some of them now because we've had so many interesting ones. From Magan Singodia, what do the churches say to what is going on in Bethlehem, especially certain sections of the evangelical church who seem to support Israel so strongly?
Yeah.
Leila, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first, but I would like you very much. We talked about it a couple of days ago about the statement from the bishops on the ground. Maybe you can mention that as well. Yeah. But I think that you have to imagine that well, there is on one hand kind of hard power. So the processes that mean the interests of the churches themselves, the way they aligned politically, like licensing, like within Israel-Palestine, the Israeli government controls how the churches receive licenses or denied licenses to work, to do things. All these things mean that churches around the world, they are institutions. So they are controlled by certain processes and forces that are hard power forces, if you wish. But at the same time, we are all humans. And in a way, it is surprising as well how much humans are capable of sometimes behaving, following their convictions and following their values. Virtue, sometimes virtue does play a role, and we should not forget that. And I think reaching out in a personal way to politicians, to churches as well, even those who currently do not support us. And I've spoken during my tour in the United States, I've spoken to a lot of groups who really not only don't support our cause, but really are invested in a completely different turn of way forward. I mean, I screened my film once to a group that greeted me with a statue of Virgin Mary who was carrying the Israeli flag. I kind of had to speak to groups that were so badly turned. And I think you learn from experiences like these that with some patience, with commitment, with your own humanity as well, and always thinking that you believe in their humanity, you trust them to understand in the end. You come to them not with animosity, but rather with a sense of, well, I trust that in the end you will see what I'm bringing to you. And we have the angels on our side, as I always say. We are not lying. We are showing something that would break anybody's heart if they care to look at it. And I think it's very important that we keep doing it. But I think the problem though, and the challenge is that we don't have the resources, unfortunately, to go beyond the idea of stirring up somebody's heart. I mean, once you stir up hearts, then you need to try and consolidate this into an effort that is translatable into political action. And actually, and sadly, this to translate the movement of people's hearts into political action, it takes means. And you're talking about big institutions. I mean, a church, any church, is a big institution. Like if you take the Anglican Church or Baptist, or they are broken into many different churches. But each one of them is an institution, and to make it move with you, you need a lot of resources to engage them on a daily basis to formulate. But many of them are willing, and sometimes just take the mantle and run by themselves and do things. Which is maybe sometimes all that we can do is to inspire them and ask them to work as hard as they can to support our cause. But it would be good if we have more consolidated efforts, more designed to allow to constantly give these people logistical support as well, and coordinate among these groups in order to translate, as I said, this emotion into greater action.
Yeah. Thank you, Leila. Very swiftly, you mentioned the annual visit of a group of Catholic bishops from Europe and America, led by Bishop Declan Lang, who is a patron of the Balfour Project. They go every January. This coming January, because of COVID, it's going to be virtual, but they visit Gaza, they visit the West Bank, they visit Israel, and they produce a communique. And I will just mention that communique. Maybe Dee could put it into the chat. In January 2020, they produced a communique which said we should listen to the cries of pain of the Palestinian people, domestically back in the UK particularly, but around the world, wherever the bishops came from. Those countries should recognize the state of Palestine on 67 lines. There should be no economic cooperation with settlements, with illegal settlements. It's a strong statement. The point that you made, Leila, is a real one. Getting that kind of statement into popular knowledge, into the mindset of the people is hard. Getting coverage for that is hard, but it's necessary. So we have to keep on trying. And on the question of that Magan asked originally about, I think probably possibly the evangelical community in the US, Christian Zionists. We are going to have a talk on the 24th of March by Munver Isaac, the Reverend Munver Isaac from Bethlehem, from the Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, who I don't know personally, but colleagues do, and I'm sure you've come across him, Leila. And Vera.
Very well.
Yeah, but he's going to speak to us on the 24th of March on this webinar about Christian Zionism. And I don't know what he's going to say, but I will say that the political aspect of Christian Zionism is troubling, because it seems to ignore the existence of the Palestinian people. It seems to be endorsing the old myth that it was a land without a people for a people without a land. Well, there were people on the land, and there are people on the land, and coexistence is what we need, not a winner takes all outcome. Back to you, Dee. Sorry.
May I just add something? I think particularly that on the mention of Munder. So he belongs. He's a pastor, I think.
Yep,
he probably, and he's a part of a Protestant, one of the Protestant churches in Palestine. And they organize a conference yearly called Christ at the Checkpoint. So there are evangelical Christian Palestinians, and they becoming increasingly more outspoken against the occupation, and they're taking with them parts of the evangelical community in the United States. And that's very, very important. And again, just to say that when you said, what's the importance of Christians? I mean, even within the format, if you wish, of the Palestinian struggles for their rights, such a small group as the evangelical Christian Palestinian community is currently playing disproportionate role in educating Christian Palestinians in the United States about what it means to be walking in their shoes. And I think it is something that is creating a lot of challenge for both the kind of the precepts of their theology for evangelical Christians in America, that somehow their positions seem to mean bring about the downfall of people who are just like them in the Holy Land. I think, so I think they should be encouraged. And I think I have a lot of hope in that they might become even stronger voice for Palestine in the United States among the evangelicals. Yeah.
Thank you, Leila. Dee.
This is a good follow-on question because you were talking about stirring the hearts, Leila. So this question has come from Fatima Johnson about the clip that we showed earlier. She says, beautiful / devastating clip, which I think sums it up. Do you see your film as a way of breaking the psychological wall that the physical wall has created?
Oh, I mean, films and human stories in general are a key thing to share. They are your first calling card, if you wish, because you can't open a conversation without first opening somebody's heart to your story, to your plight. And this is precisely why I made the film. I wouldn't have spent years making the film if I didn't think it will be something that can be shareable and that would give people a new pair of eyes, if you wish, from the comfort of their own homes. So we continue screening the film. And as I said, we encourage people to screen the film as well. They can get in touch with us. We often we've screened it online this season to many groups. And I often, if I have the time, I also am happy to speak to the group afterwards. So it's a work that we continue doing. And I believe we might have some information on the chat about how people can watch the film online, as well as how they can get in touch with us in order to show it further, organize their own screenings. So we're very, very open to that.
Thanks for that. We've got a question from Gillian Mosley. My impression last time I was there is that the Israeli companies have succeeded in dominating much of the tourism in the West Bank, largely busing people in for the day. To what extent is this true of Bethlehem?
Shall I say a quick word, Leila, and then over to you?
Yeah, you say, yeah.
Yeah, very quick word from me. It's quite important that people who are traveling, look on the bright side. There will be travel in 2021. We'll get back on a plane, in 2021. That when they go to the Holy Land, they make a point of ensuring, and this applies to pilgrims and tourists, that they stay in a West Bank hotel or an East Jerusalem hotel, not an Israeli hotel, if they want to support the Palestinians. There are hotels in East Jerusalem, the Ambassador and others, which are Palestinian. And in Bethlehem, they're all Palestinian. So the idea of supporting the Palestinian economy by putting your money where your political opinion may be is the right thing to do. There is a problem, which is that the most obvious tour operators, the most well-equipped tour operators, the ones that can advertise most are likely to be Israeli. So you have to filter, you have to look and see what you want to do. But for the people who are on this call, I would imagine the opportunity to meet Palestinians, the opportunity to talk, if it's about Christians, to the living stones of Christianity through pilgrimage or through visits, organized visits, is part of the attraction of the visit. And I would strongly recommend it. But what that means is finding Palestinian tour operators, of whom there are many. There are many, but they don't come up first on Google. They don't come up to the top on Google. We need to go down and look for the Palestinians. So that's my message. But Leila, over to you.
Well, I mean, you've said it all, really. I think, of course, Israel is the occupier. That means, what does it mean that it's occupier? It really holds our lives in its hands. It controls our economy, controls access, and therefore it also controls some of the most important things, which are like the tourism industry. So it's up to other people. Unfortunately, it is up to people who are traveling into Palestine to try and think of ways of supporting the Palestinian economy, of staying in a Palestinian hotel and trying to use a Palestinian tour operator. There are some, and there's some operate even in Britain. And I think maybe you might feature some of them in your chat, in your information in the chat, hopefully. But you can find many online even, and I think we recommend on Open Bethlehem's website some groups that take people to Bethlehem and to Palestine. So just unfortunately, you have to make an effort. Sometimes things don't come without an effort, so you have to make it. Yeah.
Deanna, back to you, maybe for a couple of more questions.
I've got two more batches of questions for you both. So the first question is from Nina Zumaya, who is with us today, from Bethlehem, living in London. What is the Palestinian Authority doing to stop the damage of our beautiful town of Bethlehem? Are they involved at all?
Well,
Do you want to start with the Palestinian, Leila, and then I'll say whatever.
Yeah. No, I think, look, I think we can always now kind of, and of course we should look inside, and we should be always, I really don't like when one is not critical of one's own actions and oneself. We should analyze where we're going wrong, what we should do more. We should demand of our leaders to do more, much more, I would say. At the same time, I'm not sure exactly in a city that is generally being devastated by a wall and settlement building and the stifling of the economy, which are all massively exacted by an occupying force, how you could then draw a line and start really demanding things of your own government. I mean, I would love to get to a place where I can just forget about Israel and really start being very critical of my own state and its apparatus and its operation, and say, why don't you do this, deliver that, and where we can be real citizens in a real state, demanding and negotiating and making sure that our dreams and our aspirations are coming true on the ground. At the moment, it's so difficult to tell how to sort of address that, how to address our leadership. Most of what I want from our leadership is to end the occupation. That's what I want the leadership to focus on, because we need an end to the control we have in order to even begin breathing and start planning our future. So that's all I can say to this question.
That's a good answer. I was listening yesterday to the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Hussam Zomlot, who's doing a good job in reaching out to Parliament, reaching out to the media, reaching out to the many Palestinian groups in the UK, the diverse groups, to listen as well as to speak. And the point that I heard that I want to repeat is elections. We talked about Palestine as a beacon of democracy, a light to the nations. It's true. There need to be elections. There need to be elections across Palestine, Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem in 2021. Somehow. And I know the obstacles, but I don't want to be fazed by the obstacles. There need to be elections. And there's something that the foreign governments like ours need to do, which is to give an undertaking in advance that we, the Western governments, will abide by the outcome. We didn't do that in 2006. We didn't do it. So there's a lesson for us from that, and a lesson for politicians in Palestine too, to put aside their own rivalries and to ensure that the Palestinian people can speak. Because when the Palestinian people speak, they are stronger. Dee, back to you.
So the next batch is a comment followed by a question for Leila. So the comment is from Pat Bryden. If the media took up the cause of Palestine, including films like Leila's, in a real and sincere way, minds would change. There was a Channel 4 News piece that we put on our website the other day. So that's in the news section of our website, if anyone wants to see. But there's a taboo around the word Palestine at the moment, it seems, in the media. This must be changed, and urgently. Thank you for your film, and others, Leila, you are needed. And then the question comes from Jenny Tong, which follows on from this. I would also love to know if Leila has approached our TV channels, especially Channel 4, to see if they would show part or all of the film. And again, she comments that there was a very good piece on Channel 4 the other day.
Well, I have approached British TV. I haven't been successful. It doesn't mean that nobody will be. Sometimes it's the mood of the commissioner. Sometimes it's not only, I mean, obviously there are editorial red lines. I think the British TV is very jittery and uncomfortable. Having a Palestinian speak about Palestine, it really is. I mean, I'm not sort of easily put off. You know, I do try. So I can say for real that they do, and even in fact they tell you you have to understand my position. We get a lot of criticism and flack for doing something like this. So they're even open about it. But I think it does mean that we have to try and come from different angles, package our story in different ways. Maybe sometimes a particular slot on TV is looking for something very specific, and that specific thing can be offered by a film that does it. And as you said, I think we do live in an unfavorable time, unfortunately. I mean, a lot of Palestinians like to say public opinion is shifting, there's power on our side. But I think that although public opinion is shifting, I think the mainstream is being streamlined to kind of be uncomfortable with the issue of Palestine, both the political establishment as well as the media. I think, and these are very hard power institutions with which you can't argue easily. So we probably have to, but we have no choice. We have to continue working to try and change them. And as I said, the change of their tack might also happen in a way that's unexpected to us. It might happen because an opening takes place. I mean, in the United States, when President Obama became president, with his first speeches that were positive regarding the Palestinian cause and his opening remarks towards the Middle East as a whole, meant that the whole population, he was able to influence the grassroots with his speech. So I think an intelligent, maybe leader with some interesting ideas and a heart in the right place might do some things that we don't expect now. But we should work towards that time. We should not take that for granted. We should try and plant a bit of light from the Star of Bethlehem in every heart, in every heart of every person we meet, because one of them might at some point fire and decide to do the right thing.
I agree, and this is my last remark, Dee, because we're overrunning a bit, but it's been good. There is a huge distinction between anti-Semitism and legitimate criticism of the policies of a government that belongs to the OECD, belongs to the Club of Europe, belongs to the West. There is a huge difference, and it needs to be accentuated, that difference. We should all abhor, and we do abhor, anti-Semitism wherever it manifests itself, but there is a difference between anti-Semitism and legitimate criticism of the actions of a government which is friendly to our government. This is not Burma, this is not China, this is not Tibet. This is a friendly government with whom our government is on the best of terms. But the conduct of the occupation is mistaken and wrong, worse than mistaken. Therefore, calling out that aspect of Israeli government policy is legitimate and is not to be misinterpreted or fudged as anti-Semitism. That's my thought. I think we should stop now for the good of man and womankind. We've gone over our hour, which is because it was such an exciting and important topic. Thank you, Leila. Thank you for bringing Bethlehem to the United Kingdom and further afield. Thank you to Vera for joining us today. Thank you for everybody who came today. And Dee, I don't know if there's any last word from you. Over to you.
Just that we have, of course, got several events lined up. So please do check on our website and sign up for the next one in the beginning of January with RDMC, and a few more in the pipeline as well. So keep an eye out for that, and we will be emailing everyone about it anyways.
Thank you. And the recording of today will be on our website this evening.
Yeah.
And a transcript for those of you who want to take a shortcut or share the words with colleagues. The transcript will be up next week. And thank you. And thank you again, Leila, for bringing Bethlehem to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good night.
And Merry Christmas to everyone.